I started my broadcast journalism career after being trained at the Fanshawe School of Broadcast Journalism in my hometown of London. But I think my news interest came from my dad. My dad would come home from work and sit down at the dinner table, throw his necktie over his shoulder so he wouldn't get spaghetti sauce on it. And then he would ask my brother and my sister and I what was on the front page of the London Free Press that day. Even when we were little kids, even if the only thing we could read was the weather forecast. So I think that's where my newsy thing came from. And I don't think my dad knew that he was setting me up for a career that I've had for 36 years. When I was in high school, I wasn't a self-confident teen. I compensated for that by trying to be the funny kid. You know, the one with the funny asides in class. And I think I fooled almost everyone except this weird thing that I didn't know that anybody else in the world had. But I couldn't call and order a pizza. I was petrified to pick up the phone and talk to a stranger and maybe mumble or get my order wrong. I just couldn't do it. But the one thing I did love in high school was listening to the radio. And my favorite radio show was hosted by a guy named Joe DeShane on CJBK. And he was a fantastic host. He had all these people on his show, and he had compelling content, and it just made me want to listen all the time. When he wasn't on the weekends, on Saturday and Sunday, I missed him. He was that good. One day I'm listening to his show, and he mentioned something about high school football scores. So I thought, I'm going to give him a call. I'm going to call him and tell him what the score of my high school football game was yesterday. So I went to my dad's office, and I picked up the phone, dialed the number, and when I heard CJBK, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm talking to Joe DeShane. And I told him my story, and he asked me a couple of questions, and it was fine. It was more than fine. I felt good about it. So I went downstairs to my bedroom, and I was sitting on the edge of my bed, replaying my phone call with this radio announcer in my head and overthinking everything, when suddenly I heard my voice coming out of the speakers of my little Detson stereo in my bedroom. I was on the radio. I couldn't believe it. And when I got to school that morning, people were saying to me, "Was that you on the radio? Hey, I heard you on the radio. You sounded good." Even the football coach, who I didn't even think knew who I was, came up to me and said, "I heard you on the radio this morning. Thank you for calling in the score from the game. Will you do it again next week?" Oh, yeah. It was such a rush, and I knew then that I had radio flowing in my veins. My first job in radio was in Smiths Falls in Eastern Ontario, where I worked as a reporter and afternoon news anchor and 2 daily public affairs shows, and it was all very glamorous. The first thing I ever read on the air in my professional career was the Hog Report. A1, A2 heifers sold on good demand at high profits at the Ontario Public Stockyards in Toronto. After a couple of years in Smiths Falls, I moved on to Kingston, where I did pretty much the same job for a different radio company. But when I got to Kingston, things started to change a little bit for me. And I became more aware of the music that was coming out of the speakers. And we had a music director who was very much into local music and local bands. And he'd say, "Come on, it's Friday. My friend's band is playing at the Lake House. Let's all go." And we would all go and see his friend's band play. And then his friend's band, Well, they won a radio competition that we held, a Battle of the Bands. And I became a lifelong fan of the Tragically Hip. I was there when they started. And when Gord Downie was diagnosed with brain cancer, and the Hip went on what was to be their final tour, I had the opportunity and the honor of being part of a national radio series for Rogers, telling the Tragically Hip story, telling Gord Downie's story, and bringing their story to life. After Kingston, I was working in Toronto doing morning news, and I got a call from a general manager of a radio station in Sudbury. They were launching a brand new station, a rock station. Sudbury had never had a rock music station before. And what he offered me was a daily public affairs show, an hour-long show, that I had carte blanche. I could do whatever content I wanted. And did I want to come up and be part of the launch team for this new station? Well, I jumped at the chance. I moved up to Sudbury. I knew one person here. And 2 weeks before the station signed on, I got myself ready to produce this show. Well, the first morning show host was also in the market getting ready to do his show. His name was Dave Sturgeon. Yeah, I know a lot of you remember Dave. And Dave came to me on the first day and said, "You know what? You're going to be my co-host on the morning show." And I said, "No, I am not. I am a serious news person. I am not going to fool around with you on the radio. No." So he kept chipping away at me and chipping away at me. He says, "I'll tell you what. You need to promote your show. So I'm going to have you in every morning for one break, and we're going to talk about what's coming up on Midday Q." Okay? I said, okay. So we did that, and he said, "Mel, can you stick around for one more break? I've got a story that I want to tell you, and I'd like your reaction on the air." And I'm like, well, I'm a pretty busy news person, but all right. So I stuck around for a break, and then I stuck around for another break and another break. And it wasn't that long before I was his permanent co-host, and it was Sturge and Mell in the morning. I owe a lot to Dave for recognizing that talent in me, and even when I didn't have the self-confidence in myself, he recognized that. I also have to recognize I married one of my listeners. Well, I'm not going to marry somebody who doesn't listen to my show. And our two daughters who really put up with a lot of odd hours and odd things that go on in a radio person's life. So, Andre and Erica and Jade, I thank you for being that part of my life. Radio is a very personal business. You invite us into your homes, into your vehicles, into your workplaces, and that's where you have your friends. You invite your friends over, you go on road trips with your friends, you have friends at work. It is an honor for Chris and I to be invited into your homes and workplaces every day. And I think it's kind of like a friendship. So, no, I may not have been able to order a pizza on the phone in high school, but I could call Joe DeShane at the radio station. He felt like a friend. Friends come in all forms. I'm one of your radio friends. Now, if you'll excuse me, I am starving and I'm going to go order myself a pizza.